Hey students, I have started this video 3 times, but I've been interrupted early on by my dogs each time. So I've put them outside and I want to show you the last time I was interrupted, what they did. I heard like chomping, chomping, chomping. Oh, I just dropped it. Oh, let me grab it. I heard chomping, chomping, chomping. And this is the lid for my little Expo white dry erase board cleaner, and they like chewed holes in this so it's only like filled up to here now, and there's the lid. Nice fit, huh? So anyway, so they're outside now, and hopefully I will be able to get through a little bit of this conversation with you. One thing I want you to note about this lecture that we're going to have today is this is about cultural centers. And this is about chapter 4 is what we're going to cover a little bit right here. We're not going to go into chapter 4 very deeply because the entire second half of the semester is going to be on chapter 4 topics, and we're going to look at a variety of different aspects of culture and cultural identity. We're going to look at gender identity, religious identity, urban centers, rural versus urban life. We're going to talk about agriculture and industrialization again. We're going to talk about politics, I almost said urban archaeology, urban geography and city planning and all of those kinds of things. So I just want to introduce in this video the idea of local culture and cultural identity and how we look at it as geographers. So the elements of Mr. Help are going to be present all through here. It's your job to discern where the elements of Mr. Help overlap, but all of those 5 themes of geography are present in chapter 4 and will be in our future discussions. So culture centers is what our topic is today. Oh yes, and I forgot something else. Please use these topics for a reaction paper this week. However, the quiz this week, week 7, is going to be a little different. I'm not going to cover any of these things on the quiz. Please pay attention to what I'm saying to you right now. I'm not going to cover any of these things on the quiz. They will be on the midterm exam, but they will not be on the quiz this week, because what I'm going to do for the quiz this week is kind of like, I want to encourage every single person to take it, because it's a pulse check for me. It's sort of feedback for me at midterm. I want to know your ideas for improving the course moving forward. How do I accept assignments, that kind of stuff. I'm going to ask you several questions about what do you think is going right with the class, what do you think could change toward improvement with the class, and what do you think should stop altogether. So those are the kinds of questions I'm going to ask you on this week 7 quiz, and participating and providing me with that constructive feedback gets everybody the 10 points for the quiz this week. So also think of it as like an extra credit opportunity. And that even, you'll get the 10 points even if your feedback is, this class sucks, it's the worst one I've ever taken in my life, and I would tell people to avoid it like the plague. Even if that is as long as you give me like a reason to go on for that so that I can use it constructively to improve myself over time, then you get 10 points for that. You don't have to say, I'm not looking for you to say, culture geography is, the best thing I've ever taken. I'm not looking for that. So anyway, so that's what you should expect with this week's quiz. Okay, so local cultures are one of the predominant topics in chapter 4, and also cultural hearths. I've heard this actually pronounced Hearth, but hearth is the way I've always pronounced it, like the hearth of a fireplace. A hearth is the center where, especially in homes, the hearth of the fireplace was the original point where everyone gathered, because that's where the warmth was, that's where cooking came from. That was the heart of the home, the hearth of a fireplace. And so when we're talking about local cultures, ethnic identities, regions within urban areas or within country settings where particular ethnic identities congregate, particular religious identities tend to live or self-segregate, There's a weird phenomenon where people of the same ethnic identity tend to self-segregate in certain areas in which they feel comfortable. The perceptual region where safety exists for that particular ethnic identity, the borders of which are debatable because it's a perceptual region, and then outside of that perceptual region, otherness occurs. So culture centers local culture. This is where we can bring in a really big buzzword, excuse me, pardon me, a really big buzzword for ethnic identity and social identity these days, otherness or marginalization. So ethnic identity is something that is particularly personal to an individual. Pardon me, I've gotten choked up from something. So ethnic identity is something that is particularly personal to individuals. However, collectively, others who share your ethnic identity you end up feeling solidarity or a certain kind of kinship, not a blood kinship, but a familiarity kind of kinship to others who share similar social characteristics to you. So the social characteristics that I'm talking about here might be nationality, might be religious type, might be country of origin, might be food ways, might be language choices, might be accents that we speak a language with, all of these different kinds of markers. Gender identity, sexual orientation, that can be a part of social identity, and identify you as a member of a cohesive group compared to others who do not share those certain aspects of your lifestyle. So local cultures, particularly when we look at groups that isolate themselves, like for instance, Mennonites and the Amish are used as an example in the United States in our chapter 4. If you look in certain cities and look at the way the grid system or the organization of a city is laid out, you can find certain zones or neighborhoods where certain ethnic groups tend to gather. Now, in the case of the United States, where we have freedom of movement, it's an interesting phenomenon to see that ethnic groups tend to gather in a particular place and stay there, like Little Italy or Chinatown in New York, Arthur Avenue in the Bronx, for instance. So ethnic identities in other countries sometimes have been marginalized to the point where legal systems have mandated that there must be a particular place. If you have this particular part of your ethnic identity, you are limited in some cases, the business that you're allowed to do, the location where you're going to live your life, the schools that your children can go to. I'm thinking particularly right now of a trip that I got to go on with a cousin recently. Well, I say recently, I guess it might have been 10 years ago by now, but we went to Prague for her work. She was nice enough to take me with her. And while I was there, I went on a tour of the Jewish ghetto that existed during the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And that ghetto was confined by literally a fence that bordered it in. It was inside the city of Prague, but there were cemeteries where Jewish people had to be. Jewish people could not do, by law, Jewish people could not do business with anybody other than Jews. The synagogues were within these frames. I remember in particular the cemetery that was part of one of the tours that I took. We would stand on the ground level of the street on the sidewalk, and the cemetery was a good 25, 30 feet above our heads. Like the land level of the cemetery was a good 25 or 30 feet above our heads. And this cemetery had not been used for many centuries, many generations. And the tour guide explained that because Jewish people were confined to that area of town, and because legal requirements forced them to be buried only in that particular cemetery, over the centuries of Jewish occupation, when one layer of earth was filled up, they would bring in truckloads, cartloads, wagon loads of dirt from other places and put another layer of ground inside the confines of that cemetery just so they could fill it up again with other generations of deceased neighborhood members. So there are some very interesting and, what's the word here? Horrifying in some cases, examples of how ethnic identity and otherness creates not, creates, I guess, political struggle, creates oppression and suppression of certain groups compared to those who are in power. So when we look at ethnic identity, sometimes it's confined, like I have just explained. Sometimes people of similar ethnicities, when we have freedom to move, like we do in the United States, ethnic identities congregate together anyway. Like in the Southwest Little Rock area, now it is known as the Heart of the Hispanic community in Southwest Little Rock. And when you go there, you see lots of different ethnic grocery stores, churches, lots of Spanish on signs when you pass Baseline Road and Geyer Springs and out Chico. You see a whole bunch of people from lots of different countries of origin in Central America congregating there. People from Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras and Mexico, all of those ethnicities have picked Southwest Little Rock as the heart of the Hispanic community in Central Arkansas and have purchased homes there, conduct business there, and in general have their life within this perceptual region called the heart of the Hispanic community. So we will look at that more when we get to city systems and look at urban geography, and we will talk about these things as part of every discussion we have, really, between midterm and the end of the semester. So let's talk about one more thing before we finish up for this week's topics, and that's cultural hearths. I mentioned a minute ago, the hearth is the center of the home. In this case, a cultural hearth, we use this phrase in geography to describe a location where a particular cultural feature, a particular cultural aspect originates. And if that aspect originates and then spreads, diffuses through the rest of society, we consider that particular original location, that particular place, to be the hearth where that item of behavior, that belief, that political system originated. So for instance, you probably have heard in other cultures, other classes, that our Western culture originated in Greece. So if you hear the term Western culture, this is a cultural hearth classification. What is Western culture and what does the West mean? Well, the cultural hearth for the democracy associated with Western culture comes from Greece. Also, the traditions of art, the traditions of politics, the traditions of academia comes from ancient Greece. Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, all of the familiar names that we know of from philosophy that we might have taken in the past, these people were part of the Greek academy, which means garden, which means learning in a garden, where people would go out and listen to authority figures, listen to people with certain sets of knowledge like math or history or the arts, and learn from them. And so this system of higher education that you and I are experiencing actually comes from the ancient origins of Greece. The voting system that we use, that hopefully all of you are registered and will be participating next month, the system of voting that we have has its origins, doesn't come directly from ancient Greece, but it has its origins from ancient Greece. So as culture spreads from the zone where it developed, sometimes it takes on new identities, sometimes it takes on new meaning, but we can look at that original location as the place of origin and examine the way things spread over time or over space. So religion, for instance, is a major one also. We did not certainly get the ancient Greek religious system as part of our Western cultural inheritance, although much of Christian philosophy is based on Aristotle's teachings, Aristotle's principles of reason. So there are many connections. I'm stuck on ancient Greece right now. In chapter 4, you'll see a map of the United States with lots of different music origins. Kentucky bluegrass, New Orleans jazz, hip-hop in the Bronx, for instance, heavy metal in Seattle. So you can look at the origin of those different musical genres that some of you maybe today really like and use as entertainment. You can look at South Korea, for instance, as a major hub for video gamers, for instance. So there's all kinds of different examples that you can use to write about cultural hearths if you would like to do that for a reaction paper this week. Please text me with questions. Look over in general, skim chapter 4 for some basic vocabulary that go along with these topics. And remember, the quiz is not going to cover this. The quiz is going to be a subjective thing that I ask you to give me feedback, that you're going to get 10 points if you give me constructive feedback and just address the questions that I ask. So please do that, because this is your class as much as it is mine, and together we're going to make it through to the end of the semester, and I want each and every one of you to be successful. And this is part of the way I help you be successful, get feedback from you in the middle of class to find out what's going well, what could change a little bit to go better, and what needs to stop altogether because it stinks. So I need your feedback for that. Okay, so thank you for your attention, and I will talk to you through YouTube, probably not until next week, because I think this is the only video that I need to give you this week before the midterm exam is posted. Okay, bye for now.